Hello players and GMs, I am Reese and welcome to another video by Jetpack 7. Today we are going to begin discussing the basics of how to play D&D. This isn't so much going to be an advice series as much as it is a beginner's guide to starting your own game as a player and as a GM. D&D has a bunch of rules that can be pretty overwhelming to first-time players, so in this series, I'm going to try to break down D&D so that even the least experienced RPG players can feel comfortable and excited to sit down at the table and roll some dice. So, first things first, let's build a character. All the information you need can be found in the player's handbook, so you'll want to buy or borrow a copy of that while you're doing this. I'll be putting some links in the description as well to help you find all the stuff that I talk about in this video. When building a character, the first thing you have to do is decide on a race and a class. There are a bunch of different races in D&D like humans, elves, and gnomes, but today I'm going to go with a half-orc. Your class essentially determines what your character can do. A wizard casts spells, a rogue is sneaky and stabby, a barbarian gets mad and hits things, a fighter hits things a bunch of times, and we're going to go with that for this video. Once you've decided on all that, it's time to roll some stats. Your stats determine whether your character is strong, smart, tough, etc. We'll go into detail on those in a little bit. I've found that each DM does this a bit differently, but there are a few common ways to decide your starting stats. First of all, there's the standard array in which you're given a list of 6 numbers ranging from low to high, and you assign them where you wish. There's also point buy, in which you're given a pool of points, and you're allowed to spread those points amongst your stats as desired, and then you may also roll your stats. And this one is the most common from my experience. You roll 3 d6s, those are the cube-shaped dice, and you add those 3 together. You do that 6 times, once per stat, and then assign the numbers to whichever stat you want. And your DM might use other methods. Some DMs use variations of those methods, but those are the 3 most common ones. I went ahead and rolled out my stats for this character. This is what I rolled. Sometimes you'll roll really well, and this is not one of those times. So we've got all the information we need, and now it is time to put this on our character sheet. The character sheet is essentially where all of your character's information is stored and updated so that you can reference it throughout each session. So this is a character sheet. As you can see, it looks like a lot. So let's just get started from the easiest, or arguably the most difficult part, choosing a name. If you really struggle with settling on a name, which a lot of people do, fantasy name generators exist that can help you figure those out. But if you're weird like me, you just come up with weird names like Frito Hugs. I'm a little worried about copyright, so we'll just give it a nice boom. So we got free toe hugs. Oh, that sounds like free toe hugs. I don't like that imagery. So we've got the name right up here in the top left. And then after that, we have class and level. This is where you'll put your class. Like I said, I'm going fighter and we're level 1. So we'll just put a 1 right there. Our race, again, half orc. All the different backgrounds can be found in the player's handbook. For simplicity's sake, I am going to just go ahead and go with the soldier background. They have a nice little description here. This can help inform your character's backstory. It also gives you some things that we will talk about in a little bit. So I'm just going to go ahead and put in the soldier background. Alignment. This is something that I recommend looking up. And if you don't know what alignment is, it is essentially just whether your character is good, neutral, or evil. There's a big debate about whether or not alignment is even worth paying attention to. I personally like to use it as just a bit of a guideline, but for now, we'll just say that my character is neutral. Good. Frito Hugs sounds like someone who would be good. Player name, that's me, that's Reese. Experience points, this is where you track how close your character is to leveling up. So every level has a different threshold of experience points, and once you hit that threshold, then you hit that level. But right now we are at 0 because we are at level 1. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into stats. So you can see along here, along the left side here, these are your stats. There is strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. Strength determines how much you can lift, how far you can jump, how hard you can hit people with heavier weapons. Dexterity determines how hard you are to hit, how fast you can react to things, how nimble you are. Constitution determines how much health you have, which pretty much just means how much damage you can take before you die. Intelligence determines how smart you are, your knowledge of history, your knowledge of nature and magic. Wisdom determines a lot of things, like your ability to read people your ability to survive in the wilderness, your knowledge of medicine. And charisma, big shocker, determines how charismatic you are, how good you are at lying, how good you are at persuading people or putting on a performance. So let's go ahead and assign the stats that I rolled. As a reminder, I'll go ahead and put them up on the screen. As a fighter, our two main goals are to be able to hit things hard and get hit hard without going down. So that means we want to prioritize strength and constitution. So let's go ahead and put our largest stat in strength and then our second largest stat in constitution. So that's 13 and 12, and then I also have a 2 8s and 2 5s. So dexterity, I'd like to be decent at dexterity, so let's go ahead and put an 8 in dexterity and an 8 in wisdom, and then we'll be really dumb and really uncharismatic. Something also important to note is that each race gives a different bonus to stats. So if you go look at your race features, you can see that right here it says the ability score increase. That is what these are. Those are your ability scores. Half-orcs, as you can see, increase their strength by 2 and their constitution by 1. So let's go ahead and increase my strength by 2, putting it up to 15, and my constitution by 1, putting it up to 11. Let's pause this right here. Hi, this is Reese, interrupting my own video. I don't know if you realized that, but I just went from 12, and then I said I was going to add 1, and I went down to 11. I didn't realize that I did that until I started editing the video, so it's already there. I'm not going to redo it. It's just an example. Look, I don't know what happened. I think I just lost some brain cells. I'm not really sure. Either way, it still works. The example is still valid. My constitution is supposed to be 13, but it's 11. Just roll with me. Anyway, sorry about that. Let's get back to the video. So your ability scores are very important because they determine your ability score modifiers. And your ability score modifiers are going to go in these little bubbles down here. Your modifier is what you'll be adding to any roll you make which uses that ability score. For example, if you're hitting something with your axe, you'll be adding your strength modifier. So to calculate modifiers, you'll want to start from 10. If your ability score is 10, your modifier is 0. The modifier goes up or down 1 for every 2 points above or below 10. That might have sounded confusing. In simpler terms, if you have 12 strength, your modifier is 1. If you have 14 strength, your modifier is 2, 16 strength is 3, 18 is 4, 20 is 5. And that also works in reverse. If your strength is 8, your modifier is -1, 6 is -2, 4 is -3, etc. 20 is the maximum you can have in any of your ability scores, so 5 is the highest modifier that you can go, outside of a couple magic items that can increase it, but we won't worry about that right now. So I'm going to go ahead and calculate my modifiers. So my strength is at 15, which means my modifier is +2. My dexterity is 8, which means my modifier is -1. Constitution is at 11, so my modifier is 0. Intelligence is at 5, so my modifier is -3. Wisdom is at 8, so that's -1. Charisma is at 5, so that is also -3. Looking good. Frito hugs. Those are our ability scores, and our modifiers are calculated. These modifiers are going to determine pretty much every single number that goes into your character sheet. Inspiration. This isn't something that's really used often in my experience. Basically, inspiration just means that your DM can award you a bonus whenever they want, usually if you do something really cool. Proficiency bonus essentially means how good you are at everything. It goes up as you level up. There's not really any rhyme or reason to when it increases. You basically just get better at stuff as you get to higher levels. But at level 1, your proficiency bonus is 2, and that will come in many times throughout this video. So next up is saving throws. Saving throws are used to avoid things, usually spells or traps. For example, if a giant rock is about to land on your character, your DM might say make a dexterity saving throw. So to calculate saving throws, you add your modifier to that saving throw. But this is where proficiency bonus first comes in. Every class is proficient in 2 saving throws. So the fighter is proficient in strength and constitution saving throws. So for simplicity, we are going to go ahead and mark those just to remember that we are proficient in those. So to calculate what our saving throws are, we just put our modifier into that. For strength, it's 2, dex, it's -1, constitution, it's 0, intelligence, it's -3, wisdom, -1, and charisma, -3 once again. But as you can see, these are marked as proficient. So we are going to also add our proficiency bonus to those. So our strength goes up to 4 and our constitution goes up to 2. So we're a little bit better at strength and constitution saving throws than we are at all these other ones. A lot better than we are at these other ones. So we've got our saving throws calculated, and now we are going to move on to our skills. You will use these many times throughout each session. Your DM will dictate which ones you make and when. And this is another section where we are going to be using our proficiency bonus. So for simplicity's sake, I do always like to mark proficiencies first. There are a few different things to determine what skills you are proficient in. First of all, background. So your background actually gives you a couple skill proficiencies. So you can see here that the skill proficiencies we get from the soldier background are athletics and intimidation. So we will go ahead and mark those. And then you also want to check your race, because certain races give skill proficiencies as well. As you can see here, the half-orc gets proficiency in the intimidation skill. Those do not stack, so we are not double proficient in intimidation. So unfortunately, that just goes by the wayside. And classes also give skill proficiencies as well. So if you go to your class features, you can see that we can choose 2 skills from any of these. So we already have athletics and intimidation. So let's go ahead and get acrobatics and perception. So then we will also mark acrobatics and then find perception as well, and we will mark those. And then just like saving throws, we are going to add the appropriate ability score modifier to each one. You can see here which ability score they roll off of. For example, acrobatics is dex, animal handling is wisdom, arcana is intelligence, athletics is strength, and deception is charisma. So you just go down the list, add the appropriate ability scores, and then make sure to include the proficiency bonus in the ones that you have already marked. Okay, so I have finished calculating all my skill proficiencies. So let's go ahead and move on now to armor class. Armor class is essentially just how hard you are to hit. At base, every character's armor class is 10 plus their dexterity modifier. So in our case, our base armor class is 10 minus 1 for a total of 9, which isn't very good, which means we want armor. So as you can see here, I've pulled up an armor chart. Armor is separated into 3 different categories: light, medium, and heavy. Light armor increases your base AC and then adds all of your dexterity modifiers, so it's really good for people with really high dexterity. Medium armor is stronger by itself but adds less of your dexterity modifier, so it's good for people with decent dexterity. And then heavy armor is what we're looking at because our dexterity is garbage. So keep in mind, not everyone can use heavy armor. It is listed in your class features what armor you are proficient in. As you can see here, fighters are proficient in all armor and shields, so we don't have to worry about limiting ourselves. We are going to go ahead and start with chainmail, which makes our AC 16. So we're going to go ahead and up our AC from 9 to 16, which is very relieving. So what this means is that if a creature is trying to attack you, they have to roll a 16 or higher for the attack to actually land. Next, let's move on to initiative. When you get into combat, you roll an initiative check to determine the order in which everyone gets to go. The higher your initiative, the more likely you'll get to go early. Initiative is just your dexterity modifier, so in our case that is -1. Some things in the game allow you to add to that, but we don't get any of those quite yet, so we aren't going to worry about it. Speed is how much you can move in a single round of combat. This is determined by race, so if we go to our half-orc page, we can see that our base walking speed is 30 feet, so we're going to just go ahead and put in 30 feet right there. Hit points. Hit points is how much damage you can take before you are knocked unconscious. Hit points are determined by your hit dice, which you can find in your class feature. So you can see here that a fighter gets 1d10, so our hit dice are d10s. You also get to add your constitution modifier to your hit point maximum at level 1, so that for us is 0. So our hit point maximum at level 1 is just 10. Temporary hit points, you don't really need to worry about those. There are certain things in the game that can give you temporary hit points as kind of a shield, but they're usually spells, so you don't have to worry about that right away. Hit dice. Everyone has a pool of hit dice equal to their class level. So currently, as a level 1 fighter, we have 1d10, and then we'll just mark that right now I have 1 hit die currently. Those come in handy during the game, but you don't really need to worry about them too much during character creation. Death saves. When you are knocked unconscious in D&D, you start making death saves. These are just a simple d20 roll. If you roll a 10 or higher, you succeed. And if you roll a 9 or lower, you fail. If you get 3 successes, you survive, but if you get 3 failures, then you die. Pretty simple. Attacks and spell casting. Now this is where a lot of the number crunching happens. This is the space which will tell you what you add when you try to hit something with a weapon. Every class is given certain weapon proficiencies, meaning weapons they can use well, once again found in your class features. Fighters, as we can see, get simple weapons and martial weapons, which is pretty much all of them. So you can see here on this weapons chart that there are simple melee and ranged weapons, and then martial melee and ranged weapons. Basically what that means is that fighters can use any of these weapons, which really opens up our options. So for sake of simplicity, we are just going to go with a longsword. So for the name, we are just going to go ahead and put in longsword. All right, now let's talk about the difference between attack bonus and damage. So when you decide to attack something, you have to roll an attack. The attack bonus is what you add to that roll. To calculate this, you'll either add your strength or dexterity modifier, depending on the type of weapon. In the case of the longsword, it is strength. And then if you are proficient in the weapon, which we are, you'll add your proficiency bonus. So for us specifically, we add our strength modifier, which is 2, and then our proficiency bonus, which is also 2. So our total attack bonus is +4. So as an example, if I wanted to hit something with my longsword, I would roll my d20 and add 4. If that hits their armor class, then I deal damage. And damage is a little bit more straightforward. So each weapon deals a certain amount of damage. As you can see here down the damage part of this chart, you'll see a bunch of 1d4s, 1d6s, 1d8s, 1d10s, etc. The longsword deals 1d8. So we will go ahead and put that in as 1d8. And then because it is a strength-based weapon, we will also add our strength modifier, so it'll deal, if it hits, 1d8 plus 2. So if we hit with our longsword, we'll roll a d8, take whatever we roll, and add 2 to it, and that's how much damage it will do. Equipment. This part is simple enough. This is just where you put your stuff, like money, weapons, armor, etc. They have a section here for all your money. They have copper pieces, silver pieces, electrum pieces, which no one really uses, gold, and platinum. To know what equipment you start with, you'll go to your class features, and you can see here under the equipment section, your options. So you can start with either chainmail or leather armor longbow and 20 arrows. We've already decided on chainmail, so we'll go ahead and put chainmail in there. And then we can choose between a martial weapon and a shield, or 2 martial weapons. I don't really feel like using a shield, so I'm going to start with 2 martial weapons. So let's look for another martial weapon we want. We've got our longsword, so let's also go with a scimitar. So then we'll put in longsword and scimitar. And then we can choose between a light crossbow and 20 bolts, or 2 hand axes. Let's go with 2 hand axes because that is a strength-based throwing weapon and our dexterity is trash. And then we can choose between a dungeoneer's pack or an explorer's pack. If you look up what are in these, they just give a bunch of items that can help you either operate a dungeon or kind of like survive out in the wilderness. We are just going to go with an explorer's pack. Other proficiencies and languages. This is where you can track other stuff you're proficient in. You can put all your weapons and armor here for the sake of tracking, just in case a new weapon drops and you want to know if you can use it. As a fighter, fortunately, we can use pretty much everything, so we don't really need to worry about that too much. D&D also has tools like blacksmith's tools, alchemist's supplies, etc., which you can also be proficient with, and languages are tracked here as well. Most people in D&D speak Common, but there are other languages like Elvish, Dwarvish, Giant, Draconic, etc., which you can learn. Tool and language proficiencies are determined by background, race, and class. So as you can see here in the soldier background, if you look at our tool proficiencies right below the skill proficiencies, you can see one type of gaming set and vehicles. So gaming sets, there are a bunch of different gaming sets in the game. I don't know if I've ever used gaming set proficiencies in any of my D&D games, so you probably won't use that very much. And then vehicles, land. So, I mean, just for the sake of it, we can put it down. We'll put down land, vehicles, and then gaming set, whatever you want it to be. Your race will often determine just what languages you speak. So Common, like I said, pretty much everyone speaks Common, and then as a half-orc, we are also proficient in the Orc language, so we can go ahead and write in Common Orc. And then for the fighter class, you can see here that it doesn't give you any tool proficiencies or any additional language proficiencies, so we are done with those. Next, we are going to look at features and traits. This is the area in which you track any features you gain from your background, race, or class. For organization's sake, I usually start with my race features. As you can see here, it gives you all these different traits. Some of them we've already addressed, so you don't really need to track those any longer, but some of them we haven't quite put in yet. So the ones that are really important, in my opinion, vision is very important. So anything we think is important, we can just copy and paste in here. Dark vision essentially just means you can see in the dark, which is really helpful for hitting things when it's dark out. This is an orc trait that we definitely want to track. Relentless endurance. Again, just copy and paste that. And then you can do the same thing with savage attacks, another really helpful half-orc trait. So we can look at our background now. These background features don't come into play quite as often, so you may not want to track it just to avoid clutter for the sake of not being being cluttered, we are going to go down to this additional features and traits one and look at the fighter class to see what features we get from that. As you can see here, fighters, when they first start out at level 1, they pick a fighting style. You can choose between archery, defense, dueling, great weapon fighting, protection, and 2-weapon fighting. Since I have a longsword and a scimitar, I'm gonna take 2-weapon fighting because I want to dual wield because I think it looks cool. So we'll just copy and paste that, much like the other ones. And that at level 1 is all the features and traits we have. And in terms of crunching numbers and confusing stuff within a character sheet, that's pretty much it. This is largely what you'll need, because otherwise in the character sheet, it's mostly just like general character roleplay information. So you can see here, it's like characters' personality traits, their ideals, their bonds, their flaws. And then if you go down to the next page, you can describe your character's appearance. You can type out your character's backstory. You can put in your character's allies and organizations. So if they're part of like a criminal organization or something, you can put it up here. And then of course, treasure. This is where you put anything that you haul from a dungeon. Anytime you beat a monster and you get some long swords or short swords or new armor or weapons, items, whatever. And then of course, there's the spell section, but as a fighter, we don't have to worry about that. And that is a topic for another video. So this is our completed character sheet for Frito Hugs. I hope it helps you all out. If it did, be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel to see more content like this, and hit the notification bell to hear about it right when it goes up. Thank you all so very much for watching, and we'll see you around.